Hello and welcome to Man vs. Mind. Yeah, another episode without a catchy jingly intro thing.
I know, you're losing your touch.
Yeah, I know. Well, there is a reason. There's a very, very good reason. We're bringing you a very special episode today. Our first guest.
Yes, very excited.
Yeah. And ahead of World Mental Health Day this week on the 10th of October, we have got a special episode featuring, to say the CEO sounds a bit bland, but a really fascinating interview with a chap called Mark Rowland, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Mental Health Foundation in the UK. And we've just done the interview, so we know what you've got coming up. And Jay and I were pretty lost for words.
Yeah, really, we're struggling to. Well, we'll put it this way. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as we enjoyed listening to him and his thoughts and the way that he put it across so eloquently.
Yes, and what we are talking about today is help.
Yeah.
Asking for help, and why men have historically found it so difficult to ask for help. Mark has a remarkable story, a heartbreaking story, and one that I think many people can relate to. And it's something that has driven our kind of founding principle for the show.
Yeah. I think, but before we get into it, we should probably mention that there are some dark things that are covered in this episode.
Yes, this episode references suicide and self-harm and mental illness in quite an extreme way. So with that in mind, please open your mind to the words of Mark Rowland from the Mental Health Foundation. We'll be back at the end of our interview, so enjoy. Mark, thank you for joining Man vs. Mind. How are you?
Yeah, great to be here. I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, nice autumn day here in London.
So like nice golden brown leaves everywhere and the weather's starting to turn.
Blue skies, sun is shining, cold in the morning and nice and warm in the afternoon.
Ooh,
Nowhere better than London when the weather's like that.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, couldn't
Love
agree more.
It's a sartorial challenge though, because you come in with your coat and then it's way too much on the commute back.
Yeah.
So then you're sort of stripping off. So you difficult choices on the clothing front.
Yeah, unexpected entertainment on the journey home for other commuters, I'm sure.
Yeah, just the gifter. Happy to give.
You join us from your position at the Mental Health Foundation. So can you just give us a little intro as to your background and the work that you're currently doing at the Mental Health Foundation in support of kind of men speaking up and asking for help?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, and it's great to hear about your podcast. I think it's super important, and I think you're right on the front line in terms of human history on cultural developments. You might think you're just doing something normal with a mate, but what you're doing, what we're doing, just hasn't been done in most of human history. Focused on men, so it's really fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm someone that's been in the voluntary sector all my life, which is basically working for charities. I grew up in Rwanda in Central Africa.
Wow.
So my background was in international development. So I decided to was working for big NGOs on poverty alleviation for most of my career. Met my wife and my wife and I both pivoted into working in mental health. Mm-hmm. She as a psychodynamic therapist, and me as working for in the sort of campaigning, research, public information around mental health, which is what the Mental Health Foundation does. And yes. I've been at the foundation now since 2018, and it's a real privilege to work in an area where people have just got such growing interest, and it's such a broad agenda that's got loads of space to cover. We also cover as an organisation real priorities around suicide prevention, and that's probably where a lot of our kind of research and policy work goes on in relation to especially men who are just a frighteningly higher risk of suicide than women. So we do whole range of work, and yeah, it's a real privilege to be working on a really important social issue and trying to bring some insight, evidence, and change.
Yeah, it's a staggeringly high statistic, and disproportionately so in men. And to touch on a potentially slightly more difficult subject, there is a reason that you kind of chose to move into this field more actively. Are you happy to share a bit more about that with us?
What you find with mental health, and anyone that's listening to this, is the reason that it has culturally exploded is because the tentacles of its impact when it goes wrong is so widespread, and I'm one of those. And I had an older brother called Daniel, and there was, you know, a series of things that happened to Daniel that didn't happen to me. We were both raised by the same parents, in the same home, went to the same school. Um, but for for Daniel, he really struggled with his mental health from an early age, and he was, whether it was a result or whether it was a cause, he was bullied relentlessly when he was at secondary school. And I remember trying to stand up to his bully, which really didn't help him. You don't want
Yeah.
your younger brother kind of coming to your defense when
To
you're
fight your
at
battles,
school.
yeah.
But it was really sort of psychological warfare that he was being targeted with. And he yeah, there were a number of things that led on from that. But when he was in his late 30s, he had gone through a period of depression. He'd gone for a job that he didn't get in civil service that he was working in, and it just led to a real decline in his mental health, and he got really unwell. And it was got a call to say one afternoon that he had made an attempt on his life, and they weren't sure whether he was going to pull through, and got in the car and drove down to Cardiff, where he was. And yeah, it was really tragic, and he didn't make it. He didn't make it through, and he died 2 days later. And that was, oh, it was. You just can't believe. Yeah, I just couldn't believe that sort of thing would have happened. I didn't really know anything about mental health. I couldn't. It just seemed. Someone said to me, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Very
And it
much so.
just felt just incredible and just so final. And that was really the pivot for me to look at what we can do around improving the quality of our inner lives, and really realizing that this is life and death. I'd always seen mental health as being a sort of slightly luxury issue. And then I was working on the serious stuff around poverty alleviation that affected, that was saving lives. But then it sort of all shifted to me to realize, no, this is really, really important. And yeah, that was the journey in for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that incredibly powerful and remarkably tragic story, and we're so sorry to hear about that. And I'm sure that, as we know, your brother's case is by no means the only one, sadly, that this affects so many families around the world. It's in my extended family, and there'll be people listening to this that can entirely relate to that. And that is why the episode we're trying to do today around asking for help is so important. And so that comes on to what we kind of think about being the cause of men finding it so hard to ask for help. Where do you think that stems from? Where do you think that reluctance to share and open up can originate?
I mean, I think the heart of it, Tim, is like there's a number of layers to it. But the first starting point is that for all human beings, vulnerability is difficult and challenged. There's a cost to it. There's a risk to it. You don't know what's going to happen if you reveal that you are weak. And we have this fundamental misalignment which prevents us from being vulnerable, because we're 100% familiar with our inner experience. And then I just get to see the outer experience of what you choose to show me. that's a fundamental structural issue that psychologically we don't balance out for, and so that is germane to all humans. But you layer that starting point on with men whose cultural expectations historically position them with associated with strength, provision, protection, and it's not very many steps. And you to get to a place where you can see the risk of vulnerability being too great. There's almost nothing that we would rather do less than open ourselves up to humiliation and shame.
Yeah.
It feels so scary, and it's linked to how we understand and build our self-concept around whether or not we can be seen as a credible human being. And we can't tolerate a conclusion that says we are not worthwhile and we are not enough. So we'll do anything to protect that. And I think there's lots of ways that plays out, but I think that historic culture and society, which is actually pretty consistent across different societies and cultures, and is not just rooted in cultural framing, but has a sort of biological and genetic component to it as well, in terms of we are stronger and there is more testosterone in our system. And so that plays into the stereotypes. So there is, some biology at work as well as some psychology.
Yes. I was on that note about needing to be perceived as strong and as to infer a capability of fighting. I was listening to a podcast earlier on today, and it was referencing how developments in psychology really regressed around the time of World War I, and that troops coming back from the front line claiming shell shock, the kind of fatigue, disorientation, extreme anxiety, effectively PTSD, were, as a public smear campaign, labelled cowards by the British military, and were told if you don't have a physical gunshot wound or a physical injury that is visible to everyone,
there's nothing wrong with you.
There's nothing wrong with you, and you go back onto the front line. And I wonder if that is part of this generational kind of societal attitude that men aren't allowed to talk about these things, and that it's almost villainized to do so.
Yeah, and we're not. That's right. It's not a blank canvas. So you have the sort of inherent human challenge to be able to compare your inner self to your outer self. Then you have these sort of cultural expectations around men. And then you have the systemic, what you're talking about, the systemic repeated stigmatization and shaming of people who show particular psychological weakness, which is not the same as physical weakness. There's a particular trope and a particular shame that comes with that has been entrenched culturally, from institutionally, from our education, that has built into us that it's very dangerous to be able to be vulnerable and to make and to be seen as weak. So it's I was looking back at some of the archives of some of our works. We're 75 years old, and the asylum institutions and the physical lobotomies that people used to operate on in order to sort of fix the and people were so scared of people that had a psychiatric disorder, and they were so labeled as not like me. They were so dangerous, and they had to be treated as so different from normal that we locked them away, and then physically physically opened up their brains to see if we could fix the problem. That's how scared we were.
Yeah.
And so those things, definitely, you're right. It's a number of different factors that I think come together in a confluence, which leads consistently to this pattern of men not finding it easy or knowing how to navigate their inner world, communicate externally, and then be able to tell the difference, about when they need help and what they can deal with themselves, etc. I, th- I think the other thing I wanted to say was that it also plays out not just in terms of our chances of asking for help or talking about our feelings, but it is also about the quality of our relationships that men have. If you look at the number of close relationships that men have is so much lower. So it's not, we're not just talking about the fact that we wait longer to get mental health support than women do. It plays right out into the quality of our relationships, our working relationships every day. This inability to be able to connect deeply with other people and form close relationships is really reducing the quality of life of what we could experience.
Yeah.
So it has a multiple range of impacts. It's not just strictly around mental health.
Yeah, we did a thing, well, a podcast, kind of the beginning of the series when we started this, and it was about purely that, talking. And obviously from talking, you start expanding to the friendship groups that you're in. And I think between Tim and I, we were trying to count how many people we would openly sit down and go, I'm in trouble, I'm not feeling okay, this is getting a bit too much in my head. And it was one or two, outside of family, outside of wives and all that stuff. There was one or two or three maximum. So I think that you're correct. That is probably a really big thing, driving force to why people aren't opening up, because they're feeling like, who do I open up to?
Yeah, who do you share that burden with? Yeah. And I have to admit that Jay is probably, aside from my wife and my family, one of my first male friends, at least. In fact, I'd probably say one of my only friends who I've ever opened up to in the way that we have while doing this show and having this conversation.
It's a weird way to do it, isn't it, as well, in front of everyone else.
We could be sat further away from each other.
Yeah.
It's funny, in some ways it's easier to have that conversation one-to-many with other people than the sort of more maybe socially awkward when it's just two people speaking to each other. So, but it doesn't matter, we've just got to find a way of kind of giving a bit more space and enabling us to not be so limited with the kind of topics that we can cover and talk about.
Well, I'll give a shout out at this point to Brighton and Hove Albion, who released a campaign in late September around Together Against Suicide. And if anybody hasn't seen it, we'll find a way of linking to it through the show's platforms. It's a really, really hard-hitting awareness-raising film. An awareness-raising film of two mates going to see a game together, one of whom is evidently having a really hard time and seemingly isn't able to speak up about it until right at the end, and his friend says to him, "Are you okay, mate? Is everything all right?" And he's like, "I don't really know where to start." And watching it and thinking about it now is kind of really, it's really got the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. And so we'll make sure we can put that out there for people to find that as well.
I'm a massive Brighton fan, so I
how convenient.
And I didn't make the game last week when they showed it at the stadium, but my friends were, and they all said they had lumps in their throats.
It's powerful.
Yeah, it is really powerful, and I loved the way at the end of that film, it was just him saying, I just don't know where to start, but the floodgates had opened.
Yeah.
The permission had been granted. The green light had gone on.
Yeah.
And you could see the relief off his shoulders. And it was like, because we need to find a way of make sense of the world. We're sense-making creatures. That's what makes us human. We find stories, we take lots of pieces of information, we synthesize them, and we make meaning out of them. And if you tell a human being that you're going to provide all this experience and data and input and confusing and conflicting information, but you say that you can't share that, you can't make sense of that with anyone, it's really, it causes so much friction inside of us. And it's such a cruel, I feel like it's such a cruel burden that we are imposing, or because I really feel this increasingly, Tim, that it's not just it's that society doesn't want men doing this stuff. There is a payoff. There's a there is an expectation and a payoff that keeps the status quo as it is.
Yeah.
And I feel like the sort of way in which men are given opportunities to do the kind of thing you saw in that film has almost been structurally and systematically limited. It's and dumb it down, protect it, dismiss it, and ignore it. Men have a responsibility to address it too, but I think society more broadly is kind of happy with the status quo as it is.
I suppose anything that threatens change is scary. So therein may lie the problem. That is a much more kind of deeper level conversation that I suppose we could get into. But I wanted to ask, in the 7 years, if I'm correct, that you've been at the top of Mental Health Foundation, how have you seen either progress or otherwise in male mental health awareness and men feeling more willing and able to speak up?
That's a great question. Generally speaking, we've seen a massive shift in terms of attitudes to mental health improving, stigma around mental ill health improving, a greater percentage of people talking about their lived experience or someone else's experience. We've seen role models in lots of different sectors of life for the first time coming out and speaking about their mental health. So there has been a kind of what I'd call a kind of light paint on the wall to give it a different color. But does it flow through to the data in terms of self-harm and the suicide rates and the levels of men experiencing or turning to substance misuse or other harmful coping behaviors? We haven't seen that shift. We haven't seen it flow through. It's some of these cultural, social, and societal limitations on men are really, really persistent. We're still seeing, unfortunately, way too much preventable suffering, particularly by men. And I think you've got different pictures of progress. You've got some pockets of progress in some parts of society, and then you've got some groups in society and some demographics who are still they haven't even started on the journey yet. So we can, people that are listening to this will be some way along that journey. But there are still pockets of the community who are not even interested. And then there's also a pushback that's happening around mental health, which is saying it's all gone too far. Let's close it down. And the pendulum is swinging back. So you're making some progress in some groups who are seeing greater openness, and especially in young people where they're looking to get help sooner and faster, and they're learning and seeing their dads and saying, I don't want to do it like that. But then you've got, a lot of different religious and socioeconomic groups whose the conversation hasn't started. And then you've got a reaction that's pushing back against the kind of progress that we have made. So a really mixed picture.
I was literally just about to say, presumably there are differences between socioeconomic groups, religious groups, political leaning, because I don't know if I'm completely misguided. It feels like being mental health aware typically seems like a more liberal kind of mindset, a liberal political mindset. And I could be completely wrong, I'm completely misguided on this, but it just seems as though those who are maybe more conservative lean towards we don't talk about this.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more nuanced than that.
I'm sure
because
I'm sure it is. I've just taken a sledgehammer to that debate, so I might even cut this.
No, I think it's right to sort of, but I think, one of the things we've seen in the UK is that support for mental health and putting money into it has actually been, there's been a large cross-party political consensus that this is an underfunded, under-researched, under-addressed issue. And that's because their constituencies right across the board are saying, yeah, my kid's suffering. Yeah, I lost my brother. So it hasn't been owned by the left or the right in the UK politically. But I think it does, there is a it does break down. Age makes a massive difference about how comfortable you are talking about this, how interested you are, and socioeconomic class makes a big difference as well in terms of. So I think there is a sense in which this is something that middle class people are more comfortable talking about, and a younger population are more comfortable talking about. But then, in America and in different places, I think the kind of mental health conversation probably is a bit more politicized. But I think in the UK, we've had really powerful advocates right across society, and the royal family were the ones that were really helpful in breaking this out beyond a small group of sort of mental health campaigners.
You mentioned then that the younger generation, kind of our generations, within their 30s, are a lot more kind of open to reaching out. What about the older generation? Because it is obviously there within them still. They're not immune to any form of this. Are they picking up the phone? Are they reaching out, or are they still at that kind of the lid is well and truly shut, and we'll just deal with this ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I don't know fully the data, but if you look at, for example, talking therapies, I sit on a body that looks at what the NHS is providing. The greatest innovation in the UK is they've thought, hey, why don't we provide for people free at the point of access an opportunity to talk to a therapist when you've got mental health problems, and you can refer yourself in. Big innovation, and they've scaled that up. And if you look at the uptake of talking therapies across the UK, it does skew younger. Older people are not going to say, yes, I'd like to go and talk about my feelings in a room with somebody I don't know. So generally speaking, you are seeing access to services skewing younger. But it's one of the great things. You asked about progress. One of the great things is that we are seeing people writing in for the first time or telling us about their experiences of they've seen their kids suffer, and they've shown a leadership role, and they've done something for the first time in 60 or 70 years and decided to look inside. And it's one of the most inspiring things. So it might not be widespread, but there is a greater openness to. My father-in-law went to the doctor recently, and he's a proud Yorkshireman, golfer. Was a teacher. Has done good footballer, good sports person. I'd say he's alpha male. And he went to the doctor, and they said he thought he had age-related memory loss and maybe dementia. And so he went to the doctor for that, and the doctor went, "No, I don't think so. But what I do think is you're extremely anxious." And he went, and maybe the drinking is not helping either. And so, he looked at that for the first time in his life and said, "You know what? I'm not going to avoid that." So because the cultural environment had slightly shifted, it had given him permission to say, well, that's not completely mad. Maybe I should look at whether the way I'm responding to the world on a daily basis and that anxiety is actually shutting down my cognitive ability in some way to now recall information when I need it. And if I address the anxiety, maybe the memory will get better. And God bless him, what courage. What
Absolutely.
courage, when you're in your late 70s to go, yeah, I'll look at it. Yeah, I'll go and talk to someone about it. And it literally brought a tear to my eye. So I think that's where the greater openness has given it, not flooding, people aren't flooding in, but it gives people an opportunity when the right moment comes to say, yeah, I'm going to look at this.
That's incredible. I think it leads on quite nicely, your reference there to seeing a physiological benefit to addressing a psychological problem. If I put it really bluntly, if I took another sledgehammer to the question, I'd ask, why should men go and get help? We addressed it fairly directly at the start of our interview, of our conversation. But firstly, why should men ask for help, and how how can they start going about doing that? In what environment is the best way to start trying to open up and get a bit of help?
Yeah, and I think we should try to be like, if we were marketing men, and I'm not, but we do need a marketing lens on this. We need to have like a kind of what's going to motivate behavior change, and telling people to be more open about their feelings and to talk more when that sounds really scary. Doesn't sound that inviting.
No.
But I'm sure I'm sure this Harvard study around human development. Have you that has gone on for 75 years, and it looked at college students in America, and then in Harvard, and then also kids from lower socioeconomic groups in Chicago. And it's been studying them for 75 years, the health outcomes, psychological, what's happened to them in their lives.
Wow.
And it started off as all men. It was like about 650 men. They've added women since, but the richest data is actually on what's happened to the men, and it's the oldest longitudinal study in the world. But if I was saying like, why should men bother? It's like, it's really clear from the data that if you want a fulfilling and meaningful life, you've got to develop high quality relationships. They're the biggest protective factor for your psychological and physical health. And the key to unlocking fruitful relationships is you've got to show up and show who you are and be vulnerable, the good and the bad. So if you want the fulfillment, the vulnerability is the ticket. It's the price of admission. And the benefit is you'll live longer, less lifelong disabilities, better quality relationships, more successful professionally, and a lower incidence of using substance misuse or having all of the symptoms around poor mental health. So less anxiety, less depression. So there's I think there are some really key benefits that we should be saying that there is a prize at the end of the rainbow for taking this difficult step. It's worth it. We've got to really be able to sell that.
I mean, in theory, it sells itself. It's live longer, be happier, have a more successful career, have better relationships. Yeah. It's a winning ticket. You just have to. You just have to start. I mean, I don't know if I'm the only one, and maybe I am. I mean, I started a podcast about this thing for goodness sake. I love feeling vulnerable. It's mad.
Yeah.
But only with one person, with my wife. I don't just go out to a stranger and open myself up completely. I just do it on the internet instead. But I can see why it's so intimidating if you've not been brought up in that way. Actually, may I ask, and forgive me if this is a really personal question, were you brought up in an environment where you were encouraged to be open and to talk and to express yourself?
I would say yes. I would say I was. I mean, my parents were missionaries in Africa, busy. My dad was a doctor, but that was sort of a sort of religious environment, and one in which it was there was a big emphasis on love and on service. But my dad in particular was very, very honest. My mum had experienced depression. She talked about that, but they didn't talk about mental health very much.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they were very skilled at being able to navigate or see the signs, actually, especially in relation to my brother. But my dad did model vulnerability. And I agree with you that maybe we need more. We keep on saying how hard it is to talk. It's kind of also exhilarating when you take that step and you open it up. And we need, maybe this is something that we could do as a foundation. We need more data to show, like, how many times does it go wrong versus how many times is it a positive experience for people? Because I bet you, in my example, when you open up, unless you get it catastrophically wrong to the wrong person, I've never had that. I don't know if it's your experience. I've never thought. Sometimes I've overshared, but I've never regretted it.
We did an episode last week. I had quite a serious, significant panic attack, and Tim was one of the first people I messaged saying, "Hey, I had this. It wasn't great." and I was like, I think I want to talk about it. I think I want to talk about it on an episode. And that fear I had building up to the week where we were sitting down, like, oh, am I actually going to do this? Am I going to lay myself bare and talk about, you know, how I was feeling through the whole week and what led up to it and why it happened and then what was happening whilst it was happening. And then afterwards, my shoulders were light. I was like, oh, that's why I wanted to do it. That's why we wanted to do this, because I felt so much actually energy from doing it.
Yeah. And the response that you received from people who listened to the episode,
it was good as well.
Was
nice.
Astonishing.
Yeah.
And if you haven't listened to the episode, dear listener,
please
go back now and listen to Anatomy of a Panic Attack. You'll find it on the Man vs. Mind feed. Like we said, it's great to open up, and the benefits are endless. But there's the challenge in you can't force people to do it, and it can only really be done when you're ready to do so. It took me the best part of a decade of knowing I had some sort of mental health issue to go to therapy and to speak to a professional to start getting some help. How do you see that being something that can be changed, if it can be changed, or how would you encourage somebody who is kind of aware or familiar or has a feeling that there's something not right? How would you encourage someone to take that leap if they might not be ready?
Yeah. And I think it is important to be ready and to, I think the first step for me is there's tremendous amount of inner work that you can do if you're not ready to talk to someone. There's loads that you can do to try to understand what's happening inside of you and what might be causing that. So I think the first and biggest obstacle, I think even before you get to telling someone else, is can you tell yourself? Can you articulate what you're experiencing and put that into words in some way? And I think the two things that men do disproportionately is they sort of diminish and dismiss their own feelings. We're so quick to say, oh, well, it's nothing, or it's I'm sure everyone else has got it worse, or that's nowhere near a mental health problem, or whatever. And your job is not to score it or evaluate it. Your job is just to name it, and then understand what is happening as a result of those difficult feelings. What's the consequence? Can you not just describe what you're feeling, but what you're doing are you withdrawing and spending a lot of time sulking and not communicating? Are you getting angry? Are you spending time ruminating, so that most of your working day is just processing things that you're thinking about and you can't really be present? So can you plot that journey for yourself? And I think sometimes therapy can help do that in a deeper way. But all of us can, I think it's beholden on what it is to be a man, to be able to describe and name what we're thinking, how we're feeling, and therefore what the consequences of that are. And that's the start of the journey, because you're like, well, am I happy with that being the reality, or could it be slightly better? And so, I think that's the start of the start of the journey, even before you get to talking. It's okay to be a man who loves engaging with sport, that loves engaging with who is tough and strong and is good at providing. And I think the key is that we're having a conversation that means that men are not limited with an emotional straitjacket to just respond to the world's challenges and situations in the same way with the same formula. And I think what you have in sort of the social expectations around females is that there's a greater diversity of what it means to be a female, and it is slightly less monolithic. So what we want is a sort of 3D, 4D version of what it means to be a man. And we, in therapeutic terms, we call that psychological flexibility. the ability to deploy the right response and different approaches depending on what that context is. And that will give you the best chance of navigating this thing through life in a healthy way. Tenderness, gentleness, kindness can be part of what it means to be a man, but also, physical resilience, toughness, and a never say die attitude when you need to get through something is also part of what it means to be a man. You can encompass all of that. You don't have to deny any of it. You don't have to make any false choices. And we need the conversation on mental health to embrace all of the different facets of what it means to be a man, and not sort of flip it into something which replaces one straitjacket with another.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because one of the things that I was speaking about with my therapist quite recently is how do I manage all of these things that I've got going on in my life right now? There's always is too much. He said that I basically textbook burnt out and a few other things. And I said, how do I get through this period? And he said, you just have to persevere to a certain extent. You do have to just be a bit bloody minded and, keep going with this. It doesn't mean that you have to just collapse and give up and then say, woe is me.
Absolutely. There is skills that men have developed over the years which are valuable. There is so it's not a case of just dropping all of one and doing something different. It's about that integration, but it's about that psychological flexibility and dexterity to be able to say, well, what's required right now? In any world, that if you've got more tools, you can do more jobs.
So if you are able to begin that journey, everybody is on their own journey with that, and it takes a piece of string length to get to that point. Where would a logical next step be? Would it be with a mate and talking to a mate after you've done that kind of ruminating and kind of speaking to yourself? Is it talking to a mate? Is it talking to a family member or a loved one? Or is it going to your GP or to a charity like the Mental Health Foundation? What is a logical next step for someone who has maybe thought about this and ruminated on it and thinks, okay, I'd like to go a step further?
Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone. But I would just say this, that I think it's sensible to make that next step somewhere or someone which is the least scary to you. Mm-hmm. Like, this isn't an exercise in going to the most public place or, the most risky person that you can think of and proving that you can disclose to that individual. So safety, especially if it's the first time, safety is a real priority, and saying, okay, what is a safe environment for me to do that? And sometimes for a lot of men, we're seeing that like talking to ChatGPT is a good first step. It feels really safe. And that, we want to encourage people to use those tools, use them well, know that they won't always be as challenging or as, and there can be some risks associated with it. But honestly, there is now a revolution in technology which is enabling us to having high quality conversations with AI tools, which can give some sort of insight.
Yeah.
And that you can have that sort of confidential space to say. And so one of the things that we're wanting to do is provide people greater guidance and tools about how to use AI safely and in a well-informed way. So those prompts give you, and just some watch outs for, especially around suicide and self-harm, there are some watch outs where it will tell you to do exactly the wrong thing. But if it's in relation to talking about how you're feeling and having to understand that and what you should do next and developing a plan, it can be really helpful. So, but it could be that in your context and in where you are, the best next step is someone that you don't know. It could be a self-help group. We help support a self-help group here in the UK called Walking the Talk, and it's helping. It's a peer support group for people with social anxiety. So it could be that finding a sort of more anonymous but human group is what you need. The key thing that you're after is you're after validation that what you're experiencing is not just down to you and your own particular form of weakness or brokenness. that there's something shared in your experience that will be mirrored back to you that you realize is can be managed better and is also shared with other people. So I think that's what you're after, and I think that will differ depending on your context. But just taking something that feels the least threatening, I would say, is your best next step.
I think the point you made around talking to AI is remarkable. I was actually talking to AI again this morning. I was no, it's not just like typing away. I was on the phone to it.
What?
Yeah, genuinely. I was having a phone conversation with ChatGPT this morning. Not about my mental health, about something completely unrelated. But yes, it is actually possible.
Yeah.
And it has a strangely comforting voice for something that's entirely made of ones and zeros.
There's actually something you can call it up and speak to it.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't done the audio. I haven't done the phone, but there's a range of and it's going to get better and better, and it's going to get accredited. If you look at what AI is being used for, social and emotional learning or emotional problems is the highest use in terms of ChatGPT. Is
No
what people are
way.
using it for. So it's here, and we need to make sure that people have the skills to use it so that they can get what they need from it.
Yeah.
Like because you can frame the ChatGPT in a certain way its weakness is sycophantic.
Yes.
That's the only, and it can't police itself, so it can't and it's got some biases to it, but I think it's got tremendous potential too. And the quality of the questions you ask it is going to be really important to the value of the advice it gives.
Yes, it gives out what you put into it, effectively. I did ask ChatGPT to be less sycophantic when I talked to it, because it always came back with like, "Oh, you're the man for asking that question."
There are some specific sort of therapeutic focused AI tools, and the sort of you can program them to be all the way up to fairly, very obnoxious and fairly rude if that's your, if that's your thing. But really, really challenging. So, it's the choice that we face is really between coming off autopilot and taking, and this goes across for men's health, is that when we're on autopilot and just getting up, going through the motions and pushing down our concerns and fears and not understanding them and not bringing them into the light, that's what leads to delayed help, and it leads to lots of unnecessary. So the big transition is going from autopilot to proactive openness, curiosity, and honesty.
Yes.
And that is that's going to help for mental health, but it's also going to help because men are dying from cancer too early. They're waiting for heart disease too early. Their faithfulness to diabetes treatment is much lower. So there's a whole range of health outcomes for men which are worse. We're on average dying 3 or 4 years earlier than women. So it's part of a wider package of being alive to our health.
So would that, you say, be one of the overriding messages that men listening and women who listen to this show? We have a 40 to 50% demographic of women who listen to this show. Would that be your overriding message for people to take away, is kind of try to just take a step back, release the autopilot, be a bit more mindful, a bit more present about things that are going on physically, mentally, and just take stock?
The key word is intention. It's in being intentional. Don't sleepwalk your way through life, and increase the tolerance for dealing with the uncomfortable truths. And I think that's whether or not that's a pain in your stomach that you need to go and get sorted out, or whether or not which is probably related to anxiety anyway. So and I think partners can really, really help with this, because I do think, as you saw with that film, that we can offer each other, one way to open up about your own mental health is be proactive about asking other people about theirs. How are you sleeping? What's going on for you? And giving them an opportunity. And then they might say, well, what about you?
Yeah.
And then you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
So, if you're not comfortable, then if you can't do it and you're not there for yourself, what about your mate? What about saying, hey, what is happening for you? What's, and how are you sleeping, or what's going on, or how are the relationships going, or what's worrying you? I think are really important ways to connect and at least find out and build that relationship.
And so as we come up to World Mental Health Day, what's going on at the Mental Health Foundation? What are you doing at the moment? How can people get involved? How can people support your programs and your initiatives?
Yeah, we've at the Mental Health Foundation, we're focused on this question of how do we prevent mental health problems escalating and dominating our lives, and how can we recover faster? So giving people the tools and mechanisms to live with good mental health. So that's, these World Mental Health Day is one of our tent peg moments, just an opportunity to stand back. And they are an opportunity, Tim, to just sort of penetrate through the business of life and hopefully get people to stop and think and arrest them. Because that thing of like intention, it's a lifetime commitment. It's not something you do once. You've got to keep coming back to it, because we kind of like wake up and then we go to sleep again. But yeah, World Mental Health Day around the world is focused on mental health in catastrophes and emergencies, which has obviously got a kind of global relevance at the moment. Yes. And we're focusing on having a conversation and advice and support around how do you manage the overwhelm of information and an overload within modern living. So we're having a conversation about that and producing resources, which really comes down to helping people and equipping people to have a conversation about stress and about how that's managed, what the triggers are for you, and how you can address and prevent that from escalating. So we're gonna be doing a range of online materials. We've got some policy and advocacy work. I think I'm going to various speaking events, various podcasts. So just trying to get the word out there and hopefully having a conversation with people about saying, how do we reduce what I call the water in our water jar so that it just comes down to a manageable level.
Oh, so we're part of the tour. I like it. Yeah,
definitely. You're an important part of the week. I think I've got to go. I think I'm doing this. One particular event I'm doing is at the Irish Embassy, where we're talking about suicide rate within the Irish community. The diaspora in the UK is really high, and we've done work with them. So we're going to be talking about some new research that we're launching about the causes of poor mental health there, and in particular looking at kind of that group of men and what we've learned from working with them over a number of years. So that's going to be that's going to be a really interesting project.
And for listeners who want to learn more about Mental Health Foundation, where's the best place to go?
Come to mentalhealth.org.uk. And the other thing I was going to say as well, Tim, is that we're also getting people to take on a challenge during the day. And so we're doing a range of fire walks in all 4 nations of the UK when you walk across the burning coals.
Wow.
We've got a number of events that people can participate in. And nothing like taking on honestly, in this job, I've done so many. It's been one of the great things. You do so many different types of challenges. I haven't done a fire walk before, but I've thrown myself out of plane and run long distances and covered myself in water and whatever. But all for a good cause.
We could take part in the fire walk. We'll just walk across the road in our bare feet. For the moment, it's 40 degrees. So
nothing like a 40 degree
tarmac
day outside where the tarmac's like tipping 100. Well, look, all the best with all of the initiatives. It's been so wonderful to speak to you and have you on the show, and hopefully this is the first of many. We'd love to catch up with you again soon. Keep popping back. Don't be a stranger. We'd love to find out how things are going with your various initiatives. So thank you.
And me too. I think you're doing great. I really do. As I said at the top of this, that you're doing something that's pretty unique and hasn't been done. So I was really super glad to meet you and impressed with what you're doing.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
bless you. Well, thanks for joining us on Man vs. Mind. Mark Rowland.
See you soon.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't have much else to say than wow.
What can you say?
Firstly, thanks again, Mark, for being on the show and for speaking with us. And we really hope that the listener and the listeners have taken away what we'd hoped to get from this episode, in that, yes, it can be hard to ask for help, and you may not feel ready to ask for help, but there are practical ways that you can be mindful and intentional, as Mark put it, around your own mental health in the way that you would with your physical health.
Yeah.
And I think that message of coming off of autopilot
and
is huge.
What really stuck out to me and will be in my head, I think, forever moving forward was, have the conversation with yourself first. Why are you feeling this way? Why is this happening? Make sure you're, prepared in your own mind, in your own body, and then go, okay, well, I've kind of digested this to my best ability. Now let's see if someone else can help me kind of break this down a little bit more.
Yeah. And you can't force it upon yourself. You can't force it upon anybody. It can only be something that you decide to do when you're ready. But all we can do is encourage anybody listening to this. If you feel like you need to have that conversation with yourself, yes.
Yeah.
Go right ahead and do it. And if you feel like you want to talk to somebody but you're not sure who to talk to, we are here.
Yeah.
We always are.
And so will all the links to Mark's foundation. There'll be.
Yep. You can find details in the show notes of how you can get involved with and support the Mental Health Foundation. You can contact us, manvsmindpod@gmail.com and at manvsmindpod on Instagram. And as we approach World Mental Health Day, or if you're listening to this in the past, the message remains every single day. Please do take care of yourself, take care of your mind, and tell those around you that you love them. And if you have a special man in your life, whoever that is, tell him that you love him.
Yeah. Amazing.
Back next week.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.